On a side street in Leith, you'll find this place. A disused bingo hall that's due to be turned into student housing any day now. It's shut up tight for the moment, but as recently as the beginning of 2025, you could pop in there for a game of bingo, a cheap but cheerful meal, and a pint or two. And while you were there, you might have noticed the rather grand architecture. Bit fancy for a bingo hall, isn't it? Well, this bingo hall has a long and interesting history that goes all the way back to the very early years of the 1900s, when the railway arches that house this unusual space were constructed. Now wait just a minute. Railway arches? What are railway arches doing in Leith? A place where there is, quite notably, a stonkingly expensive tram, but no actual railway. Well, in the early 1900s, there were railways all over the shop in Edinburgh, including lines from two different companies, North British Railway and Caledonian Railway, serving Leith and the docks. There were multiple stops, some for goods and some for passengers, many of which had similar and thrillingly confusing names. Get a load of this, for example. Over here in the east, we have South Leith, while over in the west is North Leith. Meanwhile, over here, we have another North Leith, which was, to prevent confusion, later renamed to Leith North. Anywho, don't worry about all that now. The many railways of Leith are something we'll come back to in another video. For now, we're interested only in these arches, which were built to support a planned Caledonian Railway passenger station. Caledonian already had a big goods yard just over the road, connected to the arches by this iconic metal bridge which spanned Leith Walk. The bridge is long gone now, but you can see where it connected into the goods yard on top of what is now a sweet shop on one side of the road and a hairdresser and bankrupt bagel outlet on the other. Now, the passenger station never came to fruition, but the line was used for freight for many years, and during this time of great industry and lots of trains thundering around all over the place, the cinema opened up inside one of these handy little archways. Well, the front bit was inside the arch anyway. The actual auditorium was a bit too big to snuggle in under a railway station, and so that sort of stuck out the back, which also helped avoid the noise of trains passing by overhead. Anyhow, this was in the 1930s, and as great a time as that decade was for trains, it was a still greater time for cinema. They'd just figured out how to do sound, and although colour was still a few decades away, black and white film production in the UK enjoyed a beautiful golden age in the 1930s and 1940s. As far as entertainment went, a night out at the pictures was the thing to do. To meet demand, there were cinemas everywhere. Most chains had a dozen or so theatres in the 1920s, but in the 1930s that number soared to hundreds. In fact, our railway arch cinema, known as the Capitol Cinema, was one of 4 within a 10-minute stroll of each other. Does that seem like a lot? Well, it was. But bear in mind that people didn't have TVs at home back then, so cinema really was one of the main forms of entertainment. You might go on a weekly basis. And cinemas had a lot more going on than just films. The Capitol, for example, had various kids' clubs during the day, and also put on concerts, fundraisers, beauty competitions, variety performances, and boxing matches. Other cinemas around the city had a similarly varied programme. Plus, they were much smaller, usually only with 1 screen apiece. The 20-screen multiplexes of the present day simply weren't a thing back then, and nor was 10 quid popcorn or weirdly alluring popcorn buckets or recliners that occasionally malfunction and kill a guy. But I digress. The point is, cinemas were smaller and more popular back then, and so there were naturally a lot more of them. In addition to this, cinemas were also a lot grander. Movies really were something quite special back then, and many cinemas were kitted out like palaces to reflect this. They wanted to evoke opulence, stardom, luxury and wonder. But because of their popularity, cinemas could look amazing while still offering relatively cheap tickets. They were an affordable escape from everyday life, a cheap and easy way to experience something extraordinary. No wonder they did well. The Capitol Cinema was no exception, of course. It was gorgeous on the inside, and even had its own pipe organ, though much of the decor has been ripped out or painted over or replaced. When you look around the interior, you can still see the bones of the incredible, gorgeous picture palace it once was. But what about the war? When the Second Global Fracas broke out in 1939, most cinemas in Britain closed their doors, per government order. Over 4,000 cinemas were shuttered. They were seen as a frivolity that Britain could ill afford in a time of conflict. Not to mention the fact that it was a bad idea for loads of people to gather in one big, unprotected, above-ground room when German bombs were falling. However, there was strident protest over this mass closure, and cinemas reopened a few weeks later. Take this as a sign of just how beloved and culturally important cinema was at the time. Here's what one Mr. George Bernard Shaw had to say about it in a letter to the Times newspaper. "What agent of Chancellor Hitler is it who has suggested that we should all cower in darkness and terror for the duration?" Whoever it was who suggested it, it wasn't a popular idea. Very quickly, cinemas opened back up again, the Capitol Cinema included. Going to the pictures was just too important, too good for morale, and too much a part of daily life to go without it, even in wartime. Programming did shift a bit during the years of the war, with propaganda and newsreels peppered throughout the more regular offerings. But the cinema soldiered on. The Capitol even did its bit for the war effort, holding a series of concerts to raise funds for knitwear for the Navy. Of course, during this time, it, and every other cinema in the country, would have had to tone down its outward appearance to meet blackout requirements. External lights were verboten, because they could serve as a steer for German bombers, so cinemas during the war years were as dark and dull looking as everywhere else. You wouldn't see any brightly lit ad boards or neon signs, and nothing too gaudy on the outside. But on the inside, the magic continued. Indeed, it even peaked. Cinema attendance was at its height during the Second World War. I guess if you need a little luxury, some community, a warm place and some distraction, you need it most when you're being shelled by a Zeppelin. Anywho, the Capitol survived the war, but it didn't survive what came next. Television. The goggle box was becoming more and more common, and families who were lucky enough to own one often stopped wanting to leave the comfort of their own homes to go watch a movie. Some cinemas made attempts to fight back by using all sorts of gimmicks, widescreen, surround sound, smell-o-vision, but these were just novelties. They couldn't compete with the comfort and convenience of TV. Cinemas, once absolutely everywhere, started closing, the Capitol Cinema included. The last film to grace its screen was The Big Gamble in 1961. After sitting empty for a while, this unique building became a social club and bingo hall. The top-ranked social club and bingo hall, in fact. The slogan, "Make your capital in Scotland's capital at the Capitol." Week after week it hosted bingo games and concerts, paying out big prizes, more than 100,000 a year by their own maths. That's a pretty considerable amount in old-timey money. Anywho, time marched on, and the place was sold to Mecca Bingo, and then to Club 3000. As it got older, audiences dwindled. Bit by bit, bits of the building fell into disuse, with the upper floors basically abandoned. There was a time when you could wander up there during a bingo game to find eerily empty hallways, birds' nests on the stairs, broken windows and toilets with the light bulbs burned out and never replaced. You know the rest of the story. It closed. It sat empty. It was taken on by a developer and was, or will soon be, depending on when you're watching this, turned into student housing. But for many people, this odd little entry into a railway arch will always be something else. A bingo hall built inside the shell of a movie palace. A splendid marvel of a place that provided warmth, light, entertainment, stardust and wonder. Or a game of bingo and a bloody decent fish and chips for less than a £5, night after night, for many happy years.